Remember those empty store shelves we saw at the beginning of the pandemic? One day, no toilet paper. Next minute, you can't find yeast anywhere. It's like everyone collectively forgot how to shop. But hey, speaking of those crazy market shifts during the pandemic, you wanted to know how businesses can avoid being blindsided like that again. And guess what the magic words are? Industry 4.0. We dug into some really interesting research from the journal PCOMIS. It's a 2022 article called Opportunities for Using Technology Industry 4.0 to Overcome the Negative Effect of the COVID-19 Pandemic. Quite a mouthful, right? But we wanted to break it all down for you.
Yeah, the interesting thing is this research comes from the Indonesian Institute of Sciences. So they're looking at these global trends, but from a very specific context.
It's like a real world boots on the ground perspective. What did they find out? Was it all doom and gloom?
Not at all. Actually, they make a really important point right up front, which is that the pandemic didn't hit everyone equally.
Hmm.
Some regions went into total lockdown, right, while others were less affected.
Oh, totally. Like, remember all those stories about factories in Asia shutting down completely? And then here in the US, things were kind of well all over the place?
Exactly. And that unevenness had these huge ripple effects on global supply chains. Because it wasn't just about one factory closing. It was like this domino effect that threw everything off.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So where does Industry 4.0 come into all of this? Is it like the solution to these supply chain nightmares?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a magic wand, but the research definitely points to it as a key factor in making businesses more resilient,
Hmm.
more adaptable.
Okay, but before we go any further, let's define our terms for our listener. We hear Industry 4.0 everywhere, but what does it actually mean? What are we really talking about here?
In a nutshell, it's about using tech like AI, 3D printing, big data, cloud computing, all to make manufacturing systems smarter and way more flexible.
So it's more than just robots putting cars together.
Oh, way more. Think of it like this. Instead of one huge factory, you have a network of smaller ones, all connected and sharing data in real time. They call this a distributed manufacturing system, or DMS. So one factory has to shut down. No problem, the others can pick up the slack shift production around. Need to change products quickly to adapt. 3D printing can handle that.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. That's some next level stuff. But how realistic was all of this back in those early pandemic days? Were companies actually using these technologies well?
That's where things get really interesting. And this is where the Indonesian research offers some really cool insights. They looked at two very different industries, automotive and textile manufacturing.
Interesting. Cars and clothes, kind of different worlds, right? So what they find were both industries equally prepared for all the craziness.
That is the million-dollar question. And well, you probably already guessed it. The answer is not quite.
A cliffhanger. Okay,
Yep.
I'm hooked. I need to know more.
So the automotive industry was actually in a much better position to handle things. They were already further along in adopting those Industry 4.0 concepts.
They had a head start.
Exactly. They were already using things like data analytics to optimize their supply chains,
Hmm.
and they're moving towards what's called that just-in-time manufacturing model, which basically means you have the exact parts you need arrive at the exact moment you need them instead of having tons of inventory sitting around.
So it's like a good short order cook doesn't make 100 burgers in advance, right?
Yeah.
They wait for the ticket. Efficiency.
Exactly. And that approach made them way more adaptable to all the disruptions the pandemic threw at them.
Okay, so the car folks were ahead of the curve. What about the clothing manufacturers? Were they caught off guard?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of them were, especially the ones who relied heavily on global supply chains for things like raw materials. They got hit pretty hard.
So while the car companies were streamlining everything, the clothing companies were stuck waiting for fabrics from who knows where.
Yeah, pretty much. And the research suggests they weren't using those predictive tools or distributed manufacturing to the same extent as the automotive folks.
Wow. So we've got one industry that was relatively prepared and another that was kind of left scrambling. But this isn't just about cars and clothes, right? What can our listener listening in right now, no matter what industry they're in, what can they take away from all this? What's the big aha moment?
The big takeaway is that agility is key. That ability to quickly adapt to unexpected disruptions, that's crucial for any business these days.
Okay, agility, got it. But what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it's about being able to analyze data really well, understand the trends that are emerging, and be able to pivot quickly when those trends change. And that's where all those Industry 4.0 technologies come in. They give you the tools to make those adjustments fast and navigate those choppy waters.
So it's not just about having the cool new tech, it's about knowing how to use it to become more adaptable, right?
Exactly.
This is already giving me a lot to think about, and I'm sure it's the same for you listening. We've unpacked the problem, those pandemic-driven market shifts, and we've gotten a glimpse of how Industry 4.0 tools might be the answer. But how do those tools actually work, and what can we learn from the companies who are ahead of the game? We'll dig into all that right after this, so stick around. All right, so we've seen that the automotive industry was already leaning into Industry 4.0 while textile manufacturers, well, they had some catching up to do. What can we learn from the folks who were ahead of the curve? What were they doing right? Let's get into some specifics. You mentioned data analysis before. How did that factor into the research?
Great question. You know how we were talking about those crazy swings in what consumers wanted during the pandemic? Like 1 minute, it's all about hand sanitizer. The next, it's webcams and home office furniture. The automotive industry was already using data to track those kinds of shifts.
Wow, so they could see it coming.
In a way, yeah. They were looking at things like what people were searching for, online social media trends, even broader economic indicators to try and anticipate what people were going to want and when.
So it's like having a crystal ball, but instead of vague predictions, it's telling you exactly what kind of car people are going to be buying next week.
Exactly. And that data-driven approach meant they could be way more proactive. They weren't just reacting to the chaos, they were kind of anticipating it and adjusting production accordingly.
Okay, so data is king or queen. But it's not just about having it, it's about knowing what to do with it. That's where AI comes in, right?
100%. AI is like that brain that takes all that data and makes it actually useful. Remember those distributed manufacturing systems we were talking about? AI is what makes them smart. It's like the conductor of an orchestra, coordinating all those different instruments, the factories, the suppliers, even the individual machines.
That's a great way to put it. So it's about using AI to connect the dots, to take all that data and turn it into action.
Exactly. And here's another cool thing the research highlighted, 3D printing. This tech really showed what it could do during those early pandemic days.
Oh yeah, 3D printing. We hear about it all the time, but was it really a game changer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it with 3D printing. You're not stuck with those long wait times or huge stockpiles of inventory. You need to completely change what you're producing really fast. No problem. Just change the software and hit print. It's like magic. Whatever you need, whenever you need it.
So like a car manufacturer could suddenly start making ventilators.
Exactly. And it's not just about speed. It's about being able to customize. Remember how we talked about those supply chains being all messed up? 3D printing lets companies become a lot more self-reliant. They can print parts on demand without being dependent on those fragile global networks.
Makes sense. So we've got data analytics, AI, 3D printing, all these really powerful tools. But this research was looking at the pandemic, and believe it or not, that was a few years ago. What about now? Are these technologies being used more widely? Are companies actually using them well?
That is the million-dollar question. And, well, the answer is a little complicated as usual. The technology has gotten way better, and we are seeing a lot more companies realizing how powerful Industry 4.0 can be. But there are definitely still challenges.
Like what?
One of the biggest hurdles is getting people to think differently. Even back in 2019, some companies were basically taking old equipment, slapping a computer on it, and calling it Industry 4.0.
Right. It's like buying a fancy new oven doesn't automatically make you a chef.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about here. A fundamental change in how we think about manufacturing. It's about really embracing data, being agile, creating systems that can adapt and evolve.
So it's not about the tech itself, it's about how you use it. You got to have a plan, a vision for how these tools can get you where you want to go.
Exactly. And that's something a lot of companies are still trying to figure out. It's not enough to just buy the latest tech you have, to invest in the people, the processes, and the culture to really make it work.
Okay, so just having a shiny new 3D printer won't magically solve all your problems. You need the right people to run it and a company culture that's open to new ideas and change. But all this talk about investment and cost, that's the elephant in the room, right? This stuff can't be cheap.
You're right. There are costs involved in adopting Industry 4.0 for sure. But here's the thing. Not adapting might cost you even more in the long run. Think about those textile manufacturers who weren't prepared for the pandemic.
Yeah, that's rough. It's true, though. Sometimes you got to spend money to make money.
Exactly. And these days, being able to adapt quickly, that's priceless. It's like investing in making your business more resilient, future-proofing it.
Okay, I like that way of looking at it. So it's not just about surviving the next pandemic, right? There are always going to be curveballs thrown our way. Natural disasters, political stuff, even just people suddenly deciding they want something totally different.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of Industry 4.0. It's not about thinking you can predict the future perfectly. It's about being ready for anything.
So less about knowing what's next and more about being able to roll with the punches.
Exactly. You want to build systems that are agile and responsive, ready to pivot as soon as things change.
Okay, so agility and adaptability, those are the magic words. But this all sounds very, big picture. What can our listener do, like today, to start moving in the right direction? What's a good first step?
That's a great question. And I think it goes back to something we talked about before, mindset. It's about shifting from, we've always done it this way, to how can we do this better, smarter, more efficiently?
So a little bit of looking in the mirror is a good place to start.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what are our biggest challenges right now? Where are we vulnerable? Once you know what those weak points are, then you can start thinking about how those Industry 4.0 technologies can help you out.
Okay, so start with the problem, then find the tech solution. Don't put the cart before the horse.
Right. And remember, you don't have to jump on every new gadget that comes out. It's about choosing the right tools for your needs and making sure they work well with what you're already doing.
So don't just follow the crowd, make sure it makes sense for you.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to start small. You don't have to change everything overnight. Try a pilot project, see how it goes, and then scale up from there.
That's great advice. Don't try to boil the ocean all at once. Start small, learn as you go, and grow from there.
Exactly. This is all about the journey, right? Not just the destination. And Industry 4.0 is always changing, so be ready to keep learning and adapting along the way.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, from those empty store shelves to AI-powered factories, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
That's what makes it so interesting, right? This deep dive wasn't about having all the answers. It was about asking the right questions. Hopefully, it's got you thinking about some new possibilities for your own work.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today. But don't let the conversation end here. If you're listening and something sparked your curiosity, don't let it go. Keep digging, keep asking those questions, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Until next time.